There's a building in Texas that could trigger the next American Civil War. And it's not a government building, a military base, or a political headquarters. It's a vault. A vault filled with gold that's quietly preparing to destroy the Federal Reserve. This is the story of how one state is building its own money system right under Washington's nose. In the gentle hills of Leander, Texas, just north of Austin, a massive fortress has been built that looks like your typical high-security data center from the outside. It's got armed guards patrolling the perimeter, biometric scanners at every entrance, and level 3 vaults with concrete walls so thick they could survive a direct missile hit. To anyone driving by, it just looks like another warehouse. But to anyone who understands geopolitics, this is the most dangerous building in America. This is the Texas Bullion Depository. It's the first and only state-run precious metals storage facility in the entire United States. And the fact that it exists is a direct, open declaration of financial war against the Federal Reserve. For decades, the standard practice for sovereign nations and wealthy organizations was to store their gold in New York City, either at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York or in the private vaults of banks like J.P. Morgan and HSBC. New York was the center of everything. Trust was concentrated there. But in 2015, Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed House Bill 483 into law, officially creating this depository. His stated goal was simple but absolutely revolutionary: to bring back $1 billion worth of Texas gold from New York to Texas. Why would a state go through the massive logistical nightmare and massive cost of shipping tons of gold bars halfway across the country? Because Texas knows what's coming? They looked at the Federal Reserve's balance sheet and didn't like what they saw. They looked at how the SWIFT payment system was being weaponized against countries. They looked at the rehypothecation games being played by the big banks, where for every single ounce of physical gold that exists, there are hundreds of ounces of paper gold being traded. And they made a decision: we want the actual physical metal. Possession is 9/10 of the law in normal times, but in a financial collapse, it's 10/10. If the gold is sitting in New York when a crisis hits, it becomes New York's gold. If it's sitting in Leander, it's Texas gold. The creation of this depository isn't just about having a place to store precious metals. It's about sovereignty. The Texas legislature is using a forgotten part of the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, which says that no state can make anything except gold and silver coins legal payment for debts. For 50 years, this clause was completely ignored as the dollar dominated everything. But Texas is now putting it into action. By building their own sovereign vault outside the control of the FDIC and Wall Street, Texas has constructed the physical infrastructure for a brand new currency. They are currently working on legislation that would create a digital currency backed 100% by the gold sitting in the Leander vault. Picture this: you've got a debit card in your pocket. When you swipe it at the grocery store to buy food, you're not spending dollars. You're spending a tiny fraction of a gram of gold stored in Leander. The transaction completely bypasses the Federal Reserve. It bypasses the constant devaluation of the dollar. It's a self-contained gold-backed money system that runs parallel to the paper money system. This is the Federal Reserve's absolute worst nightmare: real competition. The timing of when this depository was built lines up perfectly with the de-dollarization trends we're seeing around the world. Just as the BRICS nations are buying gold to escape dollar dependence, Texas is doing the exact same thing inside the United States. The University of Texas Investment Management Company, called UTMCO, which manages billions in endowment funds, was the main driving force. They held almost $1 billion in gold derivatives and bars in New York. The Texas legislature realized that in a major emergency event, a cyber attack on the banking system, an electrical grid collapse, or a federal confiscation order like what happened in 1933, that gold would be completely inaccessible. By moving it to Texas, they've removed risk from the state's wealth. They've protected the Texas pension funds and university endowments from a Wall Street collapse. What's more, the depository is designed to be a liquidity hub for regular citizens. Unlike Fort Knox, which is basically a black hole where gold disappears and hasn't been audited since the 1950s, the Texas Bullion Depository is open for business. Any American citizen can open an account there. You can ship your gold there. And here's the crucial part. The law guarantees that your assets are kept separate. This is a massively important legal distinction. When you put money in a regular bank, you become an unsecured creditor. The money is no longer technically yours. It belongs to the bank and you have an IOU. If the bank goes under, you get in line with everyone else. In the Texas Depository, the gold stays your legal property. The state is just the caretaker. If the state goes bankrupt, your gold isn't considered an asset of the state. It can't be seized to pay state debts. This offers a level of protection from counterparty risk that simply does not exist in the regular commercial banking system. The reason why is crystal clear. Texas is preparing for a federal default. They re-preparing for a scenario where the US dollar loses its position as the only medium of exchange. By stockpiling physical metal within their borders and building a transaction system on top of it, they're basically insuring themselves against the death of the dollar. They're building a state-level escape pod. While Washington prints trillions to cover up its bankruptcy, Austin is stacking gold bars. The difference in strategy is the difference between a gambler and someone building a fortress. And as history proves time and time again, when the paper burns, the fortress remains standing. The physical construction of the Texas Bullion Depository in Leander was just the opening move in a much bigger, more rebellious chess game. If Phase 1 was repatriation, getting the gold back from New York, then Phase 2 is monetization. This is where the story transforms from an interesting logistical story to a constitutional crisis waiting to happen. The political leadership in Austin is unsatisfied with just sitting on a mountain of shiny metal like a dragon guarding a cave. They actively writing legislation to transform that inactive pile of metal into a working circulating currency that competes head-to-head with the US dollar. The mechanism for this transformation was introduced in bills like House Bill 4903, championed by Representative Mark D'Orazio and backed by the Sound Money movement. The proposal is bold in its simplicity, the creation of a Texas gold-backed digital currency. Here's how it would work. You deposit actual physical gold or silver into the Leander vault. The state gives you a digital balance, let's call it Texas Gold Credits, that matches exactly the weight of the metal you own. You download an app on your smartphone, or you get a transaction debit card. You walk into a grocery store or a gas station. You swipe your card to buy some brisket or a tank of diesel fuel. Behind the scenes, the system instantly transfers ownership of that tiny fraction of gold from your account to the merchant's account. No US dollars are created. No Federal Reserve notes are involved. The unit of measurement is the milligram of gold, not the paper dollar. The merchant can then choose to keep the gold, betting it will increase in value, or instantly convert it to dollars to pay their suppliers. This destroys the main argument against the gold standard, which is that it's too difficult to use for transactions. For 100 years, economists have argued that gold is an outdated relic because you cut and shave off a tiny piece of a gold coin to pay for a coffee. It's too awkward for modern business. Texas is using financial technology to solve the physics problem. By digitizing the ownership title to the gold, they make it as divisible and liquid as a Venmo payment. They've created a stablecoin. But unlike the crypto stablecoins like Tether or USDC, which are backed by questionable commercial paper and dollar debt, the Texas coin is backed by 100% allocated physical metal sitting in a state-guarded vault. It's hard money moving at the speed of the internet. The motivation for this is explicitly political. It's a preemptive strike against the central bank digital currency, or CBDC, that the Federal Reserve is researching the digital dollar. Governor Greg Abbott and the Texas legislature have been vocally opposed to a federal CBDC, viewing it as a tool for surveillance and control, a way for Washington to track every purchase, limit carbon footprints, or freeze the assets of political opponents. Like we saw in the Canadian trucker protests. The Texas gold currency is the anti-CBDC. A federal CBDC is centralized, surveillance-based, and inflationary. They can program it to lose value to force you to spend it. The Texas gold currency is state-based, privacy-focused, and deflationary. It gains purchasing power over time. By building this infrastructure, Texas is offering its citizens an opt-out option. If the Fed launches a Fed coin and says you must use this, Texas can say no. We have our own money, and ours is superior because it doesn't melt away in your pocket. This brings us to the inevitable constitutional battle. Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution explicitly prohibits states from coining money or creating bills of credit. However, the same sentence contains an exception. No state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a legal payment for debts. The Founding Fathers put that clause there for exactly this type of scenario, to allow states to protect themselves if the federal government destroyed the value of the national currency. Texas is threading a very specific legal needle. They're not coining money minting new coins with a face value. They're facilitating the exchange of commodities. When you pay with a Texas gold card, legally speaking, you're bartering gold for goods. The state is just the middleman. This legal strategy is designed to survive a Supreme Court challenge. Washington will absolutely hate it. The Treasury will scream that it undermines the full faith and credit of the United States. But Texas will point to the Constitution and say, we're doing exactly what the document allows us to do. The threat to the Federal Reserve is existential because of Gresham's law and its opposite, Tier law. Gresham's law says bad money drives out good money. People spend the bad paper and save the good gold. But Tier law says good money drives out bad money when the public rejects the bad money. If inflation hits 10% or 15% again, and Texans have a choice between keeping their savings in a dollar that's losing 15% a year or in a Texas gold account that's holding its value, they'll abandon the dollar. The network effect would be lightning fast. Imagine if major Texas companies Tesla, Dell, Oracle, ExxonMobil decided to accept the Texas gold currency. Imagine if the Texas state government allowed you to pay your property taxes in gold credits. Suddenly the loop is complete. You earn in gold, spend in gold, and pay taxes in gold. The Federal Reserve note becomes irrelevant within the borders of the world's 8th largest economy. That's not just a states' rights issue. That's monetary secession. We're already seeing the ripple effect. Following Texas's example, states like Utah, Wyoming, Tennessee, and Missouri have passed or introduced legislation to eliminate state capital gains taxes on gold and silver, effectively treating them as currency rather than collectibles. They're dismantling the tax barriers that make using gold expensive. They're creating a sound money coalition in the American heartland. The Texas Bullion Depository is the central bank of this coalition. It provides the custody and the storage services that the other states don't have. Tennessee doesn't need to build their own fortress. They can just open an account in Leander. This creates a parallel banking system, one that's immune to Fed interest rate increases, immune to bank failures because the gold isn't loaned out multiple times, and immune to the devaluation of the dollar. The critics will say this is pure fantasy. They'll say the federal government will simply confiscate the gold like FDR did in 1933 with Executive Order 6102. But 2026 is not 1933. In 1933, the public trusted the government. Today, trust is at an all-time low. In 1933, there was no internet to organize resistance. And crucially, in 1933, the gold was seized from individuals and private banks. Seizing gold from a sovereign state like Texas is a completely different situation. It would require the federal government to essentially invade a state and rob its treasury. That's the beginning of a civil war, not a policy decision. Governor Abbott knows this. The Texas Rangers guarding the vault know this. They're betting that Washington is too weak, too distracted, and too politically divided to stop them. They're betting that the golden rule still applies. Whoever has the gold makes the rules. And right now, the gold is flowing to Texas. The existence of the Texas Bullion Depository fundamentally changes the risk calculation for every investor in America, whether you live in Dallas, Denver, or Detroit. For the first time, you have a real alternative to the Wall Street gold complex. Most investors believe they own gold because they have shares of an ETF like GLD or SLV in their brokerage account. This is a dangerous illusion. When you own an ETF, you don't own gold. You own a trust unit that represents a claim on a complicated web of unallocated metal stored in the vaults of subcustodians, usually banks like HSBC or JP Morgan in London. In a systemic crisis, the kind of force majeure event that Texas is preparing for, these ETFs have cash settlement clauses. This means that if the physical metal is unavailable because it's been loaned out or pledged multiple times, the fund isn't legally required to give you gold. They can simply write you a check for the last traded price of gold in rapidly worthless dollars. You bought gold to protect yourself from the collapse of the dollar, but when the collapse happens, you get paid in dollars. It's the ultimate scam. The Texas Bullion Depository offers the solution: segregated storage. This is the most critical legal distinction in the precious metals world. Unallocated storage, like ETFs and banks, you're an unsecured creditor. The gold is on the bank's balance sheet. If the bank fails, your gold is an asset that can be seized to pay the bank's other debts. This is called a bail-in. Allocated storage. You own specific bars, but they're mixed in a pile with other people's gold. Segregated storage, like Texas, your coins and bars are physically separated, wrapped, and sealed in your own personal compartment. You hold the legal title. The state is just the landlord of the vault. If the state of Texas goes bankrupt or the depository operator fails, your gold isn't considered an asset of the bankruptcy. It can't be touched. This is true ownership. It's the only form of ownership that survives a total financial reset. So how do you use this fortress if you're not a Texan? The process is intentionally designed to be as simple as opening a bank account. Step 1. Open an account. You can do this online at the official depository website. You don't need a Texas driver's license. You just need to be a U.S. citizen or legal resident. Step 2. Transfer existing metal. If you have gold sitting in a safety deposit box, which is risky because of bank holidays, or buried in your backyard, you can ship it to Leander. The depository works with insured carriers who will pick up your metal, verify it, and transport it to the vault. Step 3. Buy direct. You don't have to ship metal. You can buy gold and silver from major dealers like JM Bullion or U.S. Gold Bureau and Select. Delivery to Texas Bullion Depository at checkout. The metal goes straight from the mint to the vault, never exposing you to shipping network risk points. This infrastructure allows you to build your own personal central bank. You can hold your wealth in a jurisdiction that's actively hostile to federal overreach. You can sleep soundly at night, knowing that your life savings are protected by the same security forces that protect the Texas state capitol. And perhaps most importantly, you're positioning yourself for the exchange economy we discussed in the previous section. If the Texas gold currency, the digital transaction layer, goes live and becomes a national standard, your metal is already in the system. You'll be able to spend your gold instantly, anywhere in the world, while your neighbors are stuck trying to sell paper ETF shares that have been frozen by the SEC. There's a psychological barrier to overcome here. We've been conditioned to trust the system. We trust that the bank has our money. We trust that the ETF has our gold. We trust that the government will honor its debts. The Texas Bullion Depository is a monument to the end of that trust. It's a physical manifestation of the belief that if you don't physically hold it, you don't actually own it. The state of Texas has looked at the trajectory of U.S. debt, $36 trillion and climbing vertically, and concluded that the math doesn't add up. They know that eventually the music stops. And when it does, the only thing that will matter is physical reality. They've built their ark. They've opened the doors. The rain is already starting to fall. Are you going to get on board?